So Lee Woodman is with us today. But I am so excited to talk about the intersection of art and activism and healing and all the things. I'm not wise enough to even know what to ask of you. So I am sitting at your feet as a learner, saying, what should all these white women need to know in today's culture that we've been sheltered from or haven't connected the dots? I have found in my own deconstructing and healing journey that art bypasses the conditioning and gets to that authentic expression, and sometimes it's color, and sometimes it's poetry, and sometimes it's music. But there are ways that the arts have a way of bypassing our social conditioning and getting right to the core of humanity.
So true. It really is, and I think this is true of all the arts, but poetry in particular, I think slows us down. It makes us think. Um, it's short enough to offer new perspectives, inspire change, get people to talk to each other. And I think that's a way of building community.
Mhm. I was in a women's group, oh God, back on live journal days, way back. And one of the things we did were haikus, which is a short version. And you had to be precise with your words to do that, but it really is another way to see yourself.
You have to sort of get to the kernel of an idea, and haikus are particularly good at that. 3 lines, a certain number of words or syllables, and then an idea, a backing up of that idea, and then a surprise to make you think a different thought at the end.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And so, what do you tell us about your positioning in the world, what you do, and
Okay.
um,
Well, I'm a poet, and I am lucky to have had 6 books published by independent presses. And my background has really influenced me a lot. I'm an American, but grew up in France and India, where my father and mother worked. Took my sister and I when we were 2 and 4. And then the first time that I came to live in the States was when I was 14. So that was a culture shift for me. I knew a lot more about Asian history and art and music and dance from Europe and Asia than I did about America. And I think the smells, the tastes, the colors, the cultural differences have stuck with me ever since, especially when I was writing about color.
tell me more, because as I looked at cultural shifts, excuse me a minute, I just lost you. There we are. As I've looked at my own cultural shifts and my Heinz 57 white variety of history, uh, we're kind of bland over here.
Well, when you really go into people's stories, everybody has a story. And, yes, we're white, and I'm assuming you're American. I don't know.
I am, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But when it comes down to it, people from other countries, white, black, green, or brown, all have different backgrounds, different grandparents, different cultural habits in food and clothing, music. So, uh, you know, I'll tell you a little bit about color in different countries. Here, when someone dies and we're in mourning, we wear black. And to go to a funeral, we wear black. In India, it's white. In Egypt, it's orange. And so, what makes these differences? And I think it has to do with going way, 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 way back in time. And some of it is based on religion,
Mhm.
some of it is based on daily habits. For instance, purple in the 15th century was seen as a royal color, but in other times it has been seen as a prison color. So, green was thought to be very, very unreliable in the Middle Ages because the dyes made to make green were very toxic and unstable, and they would fade over time. So, green came to symbolize inconsistency or betrayal. And, arsenic laced pigments in Europe in the 18th century were not really beloved.
Uh-huh. I
Yeah.
am fascinated. I wouldn't have thought about that color has a history.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, it really, really does. And there are families of color. Everybody knows when you said red, white, black, blue, green, orange, but in each of those colors, there are families. And for instance, in green, there's so many colors of green. Sheely green, verdigris, olive, pine, sap, moss, laurel. And it's not until you really get way down and dive deep into each family of color that you get these beautiful words and then see the different tints or shades. And that has been important to everybody, really important to kids, because the color is one of the things they like to talk about right off the bat. And then for adults too, and whether it's architects or fashion designers or paint companies or doctors and psychiatrists, they all think carefully about their surroundings and about their dress and about their choices of home decoration. So there's an emotional aspect, a psychological aspect to color too.
and is that psychological aspect uh, an outflow of my lived experience, or is it something that is universal, that an awareness would be helpful to have?
Well, I could read you a few poems that some are very much about the sources of color, and some are about the psychology of color, and some are about how artists have searched for the perfect blue or the perfect green or the perfect yellow going way, 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 way back in time. And I'll start with some short ones that are about anger and anguish. And this would be different for everybody, but I feel like when I'm reading about the speaker's thought on color, um, then people write their own stories alongside me. You might have a very different feeling about color that represents anger or color that represents anxiety. But here we go, and then you can tell me.
Awesome, thank you.
Shades of anger. And this was after reading about color theory from several philosophers and colorists.
Okay.
Broad brushstrokes of rage are red, streaked by dark brown doomsday dread. But mine hold peaks of bluish darts, emerging from black where hatred starts.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's anger. And then tints of anguish. When you add white to a color, it's a tint. When you add black to a color, it's a shade. So
Mhm.
this is, I read Shades of Anger, I'll read Tints of Anguish. My paintbrush turns tan into blurred arcs of soot, underscores grief that knots in my gut. Braided shapes tighten to clot in the center. Burnt brown loneliness groans in surrender.
What a beautiful blend of words and the picture you've just created in our minds at the
Thank
same time.
you.
And it
Thank
evokes,
you.
absolutely.
you so
Women.
much.
How does, so how would, so I am not artistic, although I have been doing some art things. I have a little art spot right here
Oh, let's
because,
see.
because, you see, see if I can,
Yeah.
there you go, my little art spot.
Oh,
I have
there
a little
you
art spot here.
go.
And I've
Yeah,
got my
nice.
little acrylic paints and I've got my little cup and I've got an art thing down here.
It's
And
like a little shrine. It's like your
well,
personal
I
shrine.
did it because because my digital life is sometimes overwhelmed with news and shades of all the colors we're talking about. And one point about 10 days ago, in the middle of January 2026, I just had a lot of feelings and no place for them to go. We were in the middle of an ice storm in New England. I couldn't get to the gym. I couldn't do any of the normal things. And I didn't have words for whatever was happening through here. And I had had a couple of guests on. I do history guests and I do art guests, and I learned so much. And so I just did a little drawing thing, a little paint thing, and I dug out stuff I've had for since I retired because I was going to paint and then I never did. And I pulled it all out and said, I'm just going to leave it here so it's out and it's just a little like travel size. So when I get overwhelmed, I can just go over here and blow something out. This one I did, speaking of colors of grief, hold on a second. This one, this one is the one I did. See, it still makes me cry.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That that was after a particular shooting in Minnesota.
Oh,
And when I got done with it, I had the tears and I had the blood and all these things, and I had these eyelashes. And then I counted when it was done. It was like, so what does all this mean? Because I am not an artist. I am a stick person drawer, right? There are 12 of those.
oh,
In the Cove on One Voice Evolving, our cohorts are limited to 12 women. 12 women
mm,
in a circle because that is just the right amount to keep it holy, to keep it sacred, and to keep it safe for whatever
very interesting.
that comes up.
Ve- Very, very interesting.
And
In one of the books that I wrote called Soulscapes, I was very interested in other ways of knowing besides traditional religions. And so I did a deep dive into origin stories from different countries, animal spirits, witchcraft, tarot, lucid dreaming. And it was quite extraordinary. And 12 is a number that recurs again and again and again, 12 months, 12 apostles, and it goes on and on and on. So you probably hit on something, even if you weren't aware of it at the time.
yeah, there is a lot of untapped collective energy. That's what I'll call it. And so when I had the opportunity to have you on as podcast guest and colorscapes uh, is what you talked about, I just thought, I'm an open book here, and my our viewers are our viewers are targeted for white women over 40 who are in
Yeah,
transition and want to make a difference in their go forward plan in life. But honest to God, 75% of our viewers are men.
that's interesting because I wrote a book called Lifescapes when I was going through separation and divorce during COVID. And I thought the audience would be primarily women. It wasn't. It was as many men as women. And I got lots of letters from people saying, this helps me understand the world and relationships in a way that I've never thought about before.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But going back to the spirituality and certain colors, I wanted to read one because it really shows how I've picked up language and sounds over time. And when we were in India, we used to go, we lived in the very hot climate of New Delhi, the capital. But in the summers, we would go up into the high mountains, into the Himalayas, where my sister was in boarding school. And there were many, many Nepalese and Tibetan people there, Buddhists, and they would carry prayer wheels. I wish I had one to show you, but a stick with a metal core, and inside a spiraling roll of paper that all had prayers. And the thought was, as they were climbing up towards the monastery to do their good deeds and their prayers, they would turn these prayer wheels and the writing would shoot out the message. So, and it's all about turquoise.
Oh, my
So
God.
this is called turquoise dharma. And the the phrase that they use, Om Mani Padme Hum, means praise to the jewel in the lotus.
Mm.
So this woman who is a protagonist in this poem is called JT. JT's prayer wheel and handle are turquoise, a lively greenish blue with a filigree design embedded with reddish golden coral studs. JT climbs the rocky gorge, following a queue of other Nepalese devotees. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Her chant is silent, like theirs, but the mountains listen. The monasteries hear. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Each pilgrim holds a prayer wheel, a cylindrical sheet metal body mounted on a shaft set into a wooden handle. On the cylinders are small chains with weighted beads on the end, helping to keep the wheels in orbit. On the outside of each wheel, the mantra is welded in Sanskrit. Om Mani Padme Hum. On the inside, a long strip of rolled up tissue paper repeats the phrase in ink thousands of times. Tibetans call turquoise sky tone, a protector of token of love. Higher and higher the climbers mount toward the blue, intent on spreading goodwill to all sentient beings. Rocks tumble across the pilgrim's path, but they are sure-footed, focused on accumulating wisdom, building merit. The marchers gaze up at 200-year-old larches and breathe in the scent of spruce and fir. Snow lions, celestial animals, have been watching, waiting in the cold for muffled chants. The atmosphere thins, a richness of nothingness. The bringers of good fortune proceed forward. Wafting incense drifts down from the nearby monastery. The practitioners redouble the reeling of wheels. JT whirls hers clockwise in a gentle rhythm, releasing thousands of mantras, more than she could ever speak in a fraction of the time. A silent zephyr blows words and purification aloft. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum.
Lee, that's beautiful. So,
Turquoise in another culture.
turquoise. I did 5 years after my divorce, just pre-COVID. Um, and turquoise was my signature color. And I
Oh.
I had
Do
no
you know
idea.
why?
I had no idea why, but it was. I had turquoise tables in the front yard of my house. My entire home in Washington State was seascape, landscape. And now, of course, I have the Cove, which was
And
birthed.
you talk about water a lot and you talk about silence a lot. And one of the things I do when I'm performing my poetry and talking to people is use lots of silence. And I think that helps the words sink and go to a deeper place than just the ears.
I have a 12-step background and I've worked with highly functioning addicts and alcoholics for 40 years. And one of the things that I do, that I make sure I do, is help them understand that prayer is talking, meditation is listening, and if our lips are moving more than our ears are listening, we're out of balance. And it has served me well. And for
Yeah.
women, particularly in our age group, who are either perimenopause, menopause, making the shifts, a new understanding, the world that we thought it was, it isn't. We that list being still, be still and know, nothing of value comes from the scripts that we've been sold along the way.
Mm.
Value comes from the embodiment of the truths, either that we didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, or that are underlying that we didn't know, like why turquoise, you know?
I did an interview with someone from the UK, and we were talking about how men and women see color differently, and certain colors are attributed to baby boys and baby girls. And he said, "Well, I know this is odd, but my favorite color is pink." And I said, "I've got a poem for you. It's called Provocative Pink."
Oh, good.
Provocative pink. Like foods that go in and out of favor, so goes color. Coffee, once bad for you, then good, now questionable. Pink has also gone through many reversals. As early as 1893, pink was for boys. Why? It was deemed a stronger color than blue. Girls were too dainty and delicate for pink. Eggs, first high cholesterol killers, are now thought to be effective high protein, especially the whites. Puce, a whitish shade of pink, was exploited by Marie Antoinette. King Louis XVI hated puce, the color of fleas. He also hated her. Still, ladies in her court swooned in adoration of their queen and mimicked her puce in their gowns. Pepto Bismol pink was recommended by shrinks as a soothing room color for traumatized patients. Mountbatten pink, a lavender shade of gray, was seen as the best camouflage for steamer funnels in World War I. They got hidden in the gloaming. Maxi skirts were popular in the mod 60s and grunge 90s. Minis rose above the knees in the 60s. When pop artists designed album covers in the 60s, pink turned bright and glowing. When Crayola manufactured pink highlighters, plain text turned attention grabbing. Oh, how we change our hair from braids to bobs to bangs. How we switch from flares to leggings to capris. Yes, we yearn for novelty. And for the last word on provocative pinks, Baker Miller pink, shocking pink, fuchsia, fluorescent. When it comes to flowers, the very last cry is amaranth, ranging from a cherry red to a dusty grape to a rich plum, and all varieties of pink roses turn green with envy.
I love
So
it.
he was really interested, the guy who was interviewing me, in the fact that pink used to be the color for boys, thought to be much stronger. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cultural. How
Yeah.
I have a question for you. So this is the day after Super Bowl that we're recording this. And
Yeah.
Bad Bunny was the halftime show.
Yes.
Did you happen to
Yes.
see it?
I didn't, but I love Bad Bunny. I like his music a lot.
Well, it was a colorful, inclusive extravaganza, but
Yes.
very, very I watched it like I would watch an opera where I don't understand the words they're saying either,
Interesting.
but it expresses through my body. Yeah, I
Yeah.
respond to the rhythm or the you can see the story even if there are no subtitles, okay? But the colors, the Latina colors and all of the Americas and the inclusion of all of that. And I just thought, and people today, of course, the aftermath are having reactions for and against all of that.
Yeah.
Why is being colorful so triggering for some culture analysts?
I wonder, and I'll go watch it now on YouTube because you brought it up, and I heard that Lady Gaga was on there in a white
What?
dress. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. Very, very interesting. I don't know if I can explain why, but I do know, like for instance, in India, the colors people wear there, even the very poorest people, where oranges and reds and purples and golds, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But if you're not used to it, it probably is a little bit of a shock. Yeah. So I can't answer your question, but I'll do some research and listen to Bad Bunny.
Well, and I thought, because of your cultural background, the places that you've been and that you would have a different, mine is pretty bland. I spent, 30 years in corporate America suiting up and showing up by the padded shoulders and the blue and pinstripe suits of my younger career. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until I decided to early retire that I ditched all of the all of the accoutrement of that lifestyle and said, so who do I really want to be? Who,
Yeah. Yeah.
what,
Did you decide?
that's good. No, because it evolves. It continues to evolve. It's like my voice, my focus, my personality. I'm bolder sometimes but I'm not bland and I am never boring.
I can see that. I can see that. And it's up to us to change our persona as we go through life. I mean, we are very different from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 to 80 to 90, if we get to 100. um, and I think it's wonderful to take a step back and think about it. There's a wonderful thinker. I don't know if you know him. His name is Daniel Pink, and he has this program that suggests ways for people to think about who they are and what's important to them in life. And in his last YouTube, he made two very, very simple suggestions that I think are so important. One is to make sure, no matter what, and this is not about exercise, this is about going outside for 15 minutes a day and just walking and observing. And the other side of that is 15 minutes a day sitting quietly, not necessarily praying or meditating or thinking about anything, just sitting and being silent. What an experience that is. Really
I
wonderful.
I shifted my life from meditating an hour a day. But the way I did that it was not to follow anybody's rules about how to meditate, because those became, in my monkey mind, another checklist of to-do things that I could never measure up to. And so I just thought, look, if I can sit and binge watch Netflix for 2 hours, I can sure as heck sit still for an hour. The world will go on without me and watch the movie in my mind. And
Yes.
that's how I did it. And it is the easiest, quickest way to get me calm, centered, and quiet is just to close my eyes and see what comes up. The first time I ever did that, I had maps. There were maps in my mind,
Wow.
like like aerial views of snippets of maps.
Wow.
And it's better than dream interpretation. This stuff.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And so the way I move in my days now is that I meditate and I move and then I express before I consume.
Mm,
My voice doesn't get filtered out through noise.
yeah. Yeah. No, I love what you say on your website about that. My sister, who went to boarding school in the very, very high mountains, it was very, very sparse. And actually, they took their vacations in the winter because it was just too cold to be there. So that was their summer vacation. And when, as an adult, she had a cabin on the side of a mountain in New Hampshire, no TV, but big picture window looking out at the mountains. And I would ask her, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm watching the Mountain Channel."
Oh, I love that. Yeah, yeah.
Silent, watching, observing.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And of course, then there would be a deer or two, maybe a moose, maybe
Hmm.
a fox.
Right. So in your upbringing there, did you go to boarding schools as well?
No, quite a variety of things. My parents didn't want to be isolated in an American community.
Mhm.
And so they were very, very outgoing and gregarious. And um, because they both spoke French when we were in France, when we went to India, my mother studied Hindi, and later on in their life, they went to Morocco and she studied Arabic. That's just the way my parents were. And they would take us. My dad originally was Unitarian and my mom Baptist. But when we went to India, there weren't any specific kinds of churches there, but we went to mosques, we went to temples, we went to street parades, we went to different kind of galleries, and so the world was full of different kinds of music and different kind of art and different kind of languages throughout life. And I think, going back to your question of how did growing up affect you in that way, I think what I say about poetry is it's all about observation and it's all about listening. Observation because we look, but we don't necessarily see, and we hear, but we don't necessarily listen. And if you really are aware of that, and when you're looking at something, start to describe in very, very close detail what it is, whether it's the stripe on the back of a bird's head or a painting that has um, purple used for shadows rather than gray or black, that in your head you think, oh, shadows are gray or black, but no. And so it's all about merging all the different senses,
Mhm.
listening, speaking, tasting, touching. And I really believe there are senses beyond the five that we learn as kids. I think you sort of know when someone's behind you, even if you don't hear footsteps. You know um, where you are in space, where your arms are or where your legs are, unless you're a paraplegic or an amputee. But even those people sometimes feel their arms that they've lost in battle or their feet that they've lost, and it's quite documented by doctors. And so I have something to read about purple, and it brings up some of these notions of phrases we use and assumptions we make. So here it is. Purple passion persists. It pisses God off if you don't notice purple. It's a sin not to appreciate beauty in the field. So says Shug Avery in the film Color Purple. She's thinking of blooms, salvia, sweet pea, alyssum, petunias, or the brightly colored heliotrope flower, eye-catching, ear-popping, metaphor insinuating, purple rain, purple people eater, light in the loafers, lavender, purple rage, purple prose, purple hat ladies, born in the purple, purple haze, the purple rose of Cairo. Clothiers, chemists, and artists search for special purples, dear and deeply hidden, some above ground, others below. From the earth, a plant, a mix of algae and fungi, is ground up to make a purple called archil, a red purple worn in wool and silk capes. Tyrian purple, wrought from sea snails, results in an even deeper color of royalty, which nobles bought for eye-watering prices. The color comes from milked sea snails at 200,000 drops an ounce, a shining surprise from a dark internal place. Color meanings alter from dark and shadowy to shiny and gleaming. Painters reveled outdoors, light ricocheted over landscapes. Impressionists mastered bluish violet tones. Manet thought the color of atmosphere was violet. Shadows didn't have to be only black or gray. Critics call the painters Violetta maniacs. Degas, Monet, Cézanne, and Pissarro persisted, using bright complementary colors as shadows. Delighting in new ways of looking, they daubed on yellow, green, and violet blue, no more black or gray. Grass went beyond green. Sky invited more than blue. And yes, the passion for violet, lavender and plum, magenta, mauve, and heliotrope rages on in clothes, songs, insults, movies. Remember what Shug Avery said, it pisses God off if you don't notice purple.
Do you, when you write, and these are, but you have a series of books, correct?
Six.
Colorscapes, is that what it's called?
Yeah, I have Homescapes, which is about growing up in India and coming to America. Um, Lifescapes, which is about separation and divorce during COVID. Artscapes, which is all poems inspired by music, dance, theater, opera, and visual art. Soulscapes, which I told you about, is other ways of looking at the world. And the latest one is Colorscapes.
Colorscapes, okay.
Yeah. And the reason for scapes as an umbrella is very good for marketing because, I could call myself the scapes poet because that's who I am. But it's because I see these books as different kinds of landscapes, and some are very literal, some are spiritual, some are dreamlike, and some are fantasy, different landscapes, ways of seeing the world in different ways. Like your landscapes, you have the
Mhm.
coves, you have the coves, you have the pools, those are all landscapes. I could have a heyday writing poems in your place.
Oh, you should. You should come and have a heyday with us. I love that. I have a question for you. One of the things I like to do is get a little bit behind the scene, but I have a question because you came back to the United States at
Mhm.
14. Yes.
Yeah.
Parents came back too at the same time.
Yes.
And I have
Yes.
talked to people who have immigrated or emigrated or gone and lived somewhere else and come back in, and there's a culture shock going, but there's a bigger culture shock for them when they come back in because, we're not the bright shining city on the hill that we've been told we are. So when you had that life experience outside of the United States in cultures and variety and quietness and color, and then came in, can you tell me about your enculturization, what that was like for you and for your parents who started here before that?
Yeah. Well, it was different for them than it was for there were ended up being four daughters. Two were born um, before we went to France and India, and then two were born in India.
Okay.
Um, okay, so when we came back to New Hampshire. My father had a job as a college president in New Hampshire. And for him, it was like coming home because he was born in New Hampshire. He was raised there. He went to Exeter, he went to Dartmouth. And so he was all about New Hampshire. It's kind of interesting that he just loved being overseas and he loved having German friends and Indian friends and English friends and Portuguese friends, and my mom did too. She was from Massachusetts. They were New Englanders, but curious and very, very adventuresome. For us to come back to America, I had a couple of very, very strong feelings. One was how freezing it was. I was so cold all the time. I mean, it was a physical shock. The other thing, I was kind of amazed at how big and how fast everything was. The cars, the roads, the cities, the buildings. The first time I ever went to New York City, the noise, it was just enormous. Everything was enormous. The other thing was, I came back and I was told I was going to be a sophomore in high school. Well, I had no idea what that meant. My homeroom was as a sophomore, but what was a homeroom? A home, a room? And because I had studied French and spoken French as my first language as a 2 year old, um, I was in advanced French, not a sophomore. In math, I was behind the sophomores. So I was in a freshman class. In English and I've forgotten history or whatever, I was all over the place, all over the place. So um, I felt like an outsider. And I think immigrants that I talk to, whether they're coming to the States or going from the States, they're not really at home in a geographical place anywhere. You're a mix. And
Mhm.
I like being a global citizen. I really like it a lot. But when people say, "Where are you from?" I go, you know, where am I from? I'm not from where my parents were from. Moved to Washington, D.C. for my whole career. And there I worked at the Smithsonian for 20 years. I had my own media company. and had clients like the Library of Congress and the World Bank and Public Radio International. So they were all, amalgams of different people and different cultures. And I liked that, but I didn't feel like I could say anything was home. Probably now, because I spent 49 years in Washington, D.C., I would consider that my home. But um, my sisters probably feel differently because they were the different ages when we were in overseas. And, we've had different lives since we came back to the States.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
And so how does your uh like you were at the Smithsonian, you did 49 years in Washington, D.C. Do you have any thoughts about how the culture has shifted and what your body of work can bring to the conversation to keep humanity centered?
What a great question. Well, I feel that not only our country is in total disarray and very disrupted and very not only unhappy, but I feel like people are in kind of a mean streak. People are not really listening. They're not very nice to each other. If they have different religion or different politics or different color skin, it's not a happy situation. And this is happening really all over the world. There's a big move towards authoritarianism. It's frightening to think back, you know, uh, to World War I and World War II and think what the differences were then and after World War II, because countries were willing to make some amends and work together to improve. Things were pretty good for 50 years. Yes, we had Vietnam, which was awful. And yes, we had other calamities. But now, it almost feels like apocalypse now could be tomorrow. We
Yeah.
don't know. We
Yeah.
just don't know. So I feel like I want to write things that are hopeful.
Mhm.
Um, I can be very dark, but it's always with some humor or with some um leaning towards future safeness, kindness, peacefulness.
Mhm.
I have one poem about serenity that, see if I can find it. I'd love to read that to you. Where are you, Serenity?
Mhm.
See, this is here's Serenity. Some things come out of very bad environments, and that can be political, psychological, or earthly. And so there is something about lotus flowers that come out of really, really muddy, murky water that's hopeful. So, Serenity Hues. I thought I knew what serenity was without color, a meditation of repeating murmurs, low chants from the monastery on the hill, muffled Tibetan bells traveling the valley. But then I see the sap green lily pad pushing from under a wash of umber muck and gray stems, surrounded by endless ripples of dusky ultramarine. Fragile lotus flower bursts forth, its seed pod heart of cadmium yellow, tickled by stringy strands of peach, wriggling bean sprouts, a crown ringed by petals reaching up like candlelight flames, pale pools of lavender, thin stripes of whisper white, tipped in violet.
Mhm. Tell me more about the lotus flower.
Oh, the lotus flower. Well, it's a beloved flower in many cultures in the Hindu religion. And I think it's because it's so unspeakably colorful and beautiful, but kind of silent in the way it pushes up out of dirty water
Mhm.
and, surrounded by other lotus flowers. And just, it looks like almost cupped hands, which in my mind could be very healing, you know. Raised hands, sometimes for people in prayer or in India, they say namaste like that. Um, I don't really have the answer, but I do know certain flowers are seen in certain cultures as spiritual.
So
Yeah.
I do deprivation floating, deprivation tank floating. Have you? It's
I haven't done it. I've heard of it.
it is meditation on steroids. It is an amazing thing.
Floating.
Floating. And it is, and for an older, larger bodied woman to be able to be weightless anywhere is a little bit amazing. But when you close the lid on one of those things, it is like like being embryonic. It is as close to the womb. All you hear is
Wow.
your own heartbeat. The water is the same temperature as your skin, so you can't tell where you stop and it begins. The water's only this deep, so you're not going to drown because I don't swim, but it supports you every place you have a bone. It supports you. It is a little bit amazing. But I asked that to say this. I had been on a cross-country trip and I landed in town, and before I came home, I went to the float center to take a
Oh,
float, a 90-minute float. And in that pod, in that moment, closed my eyes, watching the movie in my mind, waiting for drift off. I usually sleep in there. And I had this image of a flower. I didn't know what it was. And it
oh,
was coming to the surface and it was coming out of green, muddy place. And I'm floating in this gorgeous tank. And after that, it was like a vision. It was the strangest thing. And so when I finished that, I went out to the lobby of this float center and I made a picture of the thing and I wrote the stuff because it was like I wanted to cement it. And what came of there was I am lucid. And it
oh.
and it was a lotus flower. But I didn't know what a lotus flower even was. And
Yes, you did.
that lotus flower, as I started playing with it, it was LUC. There were five prongs on this flower, and it was loved, understood, cherished, included, and desired. In
Oh,
that moment in time, it broke me open because I wanted that and had wanted that my whole life and had looked for it in all the wrong places and it didn't exist.
wow.
5 years later, the life
Yeah.
that has grown around me is lucid. And it has become, I have a book written but not printed because that's how I do shit. I just make it, let it sit on a shelf somewhere. But now, when I work with those highly functioning addicts, I understand that we all want the same thing. We all want to be loved, understood, cherished, not just community. I want
Yeah.
connection. I want to be cherished,
Mhm.
included. And that came out of the pandemic when we couldn't be included with family
Oh,
and
yes.
desired those things.
Mm,
No, it's
mm,
wonderful as a woman who made sure that everybody had everything they needed while
mm.
I died on the vine to,
Wow.
to have
Wow.
that. And it was absolutely a transmission to me.
Wow.
And that's why I said,
Oh,
tell me about the lotus.
oh, well, you told me about it. And I think every time you float, you should immediately come and go to your shrine and make a painting.
Oh, oh, I hadn't. even considered that.
Yeah, yeah. So I know we're coming to a close, but it made me think of a poem from Soulscape that I wrote that was inspired by Leonard Cohen. So it's a music inspired poem. Where is it? Wait a minute. Maybe it's in Artscapes. Too many poems. Yes, it's called A Kind of Gospel. And all my books are available on my website, poetleewoodman.com. And I would love people to go there because I have some audio, I have some video, I have information about where you can get any of the books. But this is inspired by Leonard Cohen's song Hallelujah. It was written during COVID, and I called it A Kind of Gospel. The way Leonard sang it was highly religious in a sexual way, highly sexual in a religious way. K.D. Lang took it over the top. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Lyrics about tying someone in a chair, cutting locks of hair, highly rousing, highly rhythmic, orgasmic. Hallelujah. And now, in our time of plague, more and more faces in sequestered places come online one by one, pleading, Hallelujah. How the golden screen heals during time of terror. Individuals once cold and broken, a youth choir no more lost and groping, because families link through distant chords. We sing the song 100 times. Exquisite faces in sequestered places find our voices reaching, stretching, when we could not feel, we learned to touch. Maybe there's a soul above. We want, we hope, we pray for love. A melancholic, fragile, hallelujah, hallelujah. Glory, 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 glory. The guitar keeps walking bass line. A lone saxophone fades slowly. An everlasting song always ends in silence.
Mm. And that is art. Thank you. Mm.
That's for you. That's for you.
Yeah, if I haven't sworn or cried on a podcast, it's not raw, real, and relatable. That's
Thank you, Kim. Thank
thank
you. You are an extraordinary woman and a great interviewer, so I appreciate it.
I am so excited for our audience to meet you. Do you happen to be on Substack? I have to ask the question because God knows you should.
No, poetleewoodman.com. And there is a lot of information there. I don't do a blog because I want to keep writing.
Right?
But that's where people can find me, and I appreciate your letting me say it on the air.
Thank you. So this is going to air in April. When it does, I will send you the link and make sure your publicist knows we'll be in touch. And I would like to invite you to be our guest in the Cove. If you'd ever like to come in and look around, I'll be happy to send you a guest pass and let you.
I would love that. I
Oh,
would love that. Thank you so much.
all right. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Lee, so much.
Bye for now.
Bye.